What's up, everybody? Welcome back into Lettermen Row. It's another offseason report with the 40-year vet Tim May, with Andy Backstrom, and with yours truly, Spencer Holbrook. Fellas, this, as always, is presented by Byers Auto. Thank you to Byers Auto for being a wonderful sponsor to Lettermen Row for a long time now. So the offseason report presented by Byers Auto is back. Again, Tim, Andy, Spencer, let's talk about this, guys, because it's been a quiet week on the Ohio State front. All is quiet on the Columbus front, but all is not quiet because the Buckeyes have guys staying. They have guys leaving. They've got guys still trying to make a decision. We've still got a couple outstanding decisions. Lathan Ransom, who we believe is leaning toward coming back, but he hasn't made a decision yet, hasn't made an announcement yet. Tommy Eichenberg, the linebacker, who could be an All-American next year, cement himself in Ohio State history, or he can go to the NFL and probably make a lot of money. And then CJ Stroud, who I think it's a foregone conclusion. He just has not made the official announcement yet that he's going to the NFL draft. So let's talk about it. There's a bunch of guys who have left, a couple guys who have stayed. Tim, we'll start with you. The decision that was made that surprised you the most so far of NFL draft decisions?
Probably, I don't know if this is, I'm stammering because Mayan Williams coming back is big for this team, in my opinion, because at the end of the year, they were deep into the well when it came to running backs. I mean, Xavier Johnson having to obviously spend more time back there again, et cetera. Now, all of a sudden, you look at their running back room and it's chock full, and you're going, wow. When that little, I'm not going to get into rumors, so I'm not going to bring this one rumor up that was going on at the end of December about one particular running back who might be considering getting into the portal, et cetera. But it is amazing to me how sparse that running back room was going into that Georgia game, and as that Georgia game developed, and then looking at it now when Travion Henderson's coming back, Dallin Hayden hadn't gone anywhere, and Mayan Williams. But then the guy that even I sleep on sometimes just because you kind of forgot about him is Evan Pryor, coming back from that knee injury. Wow. I mean, that's a hell of a running back room. So I'm going to throw that one out there. By the way, Lathan Ransom is really considering leaving.
I don't know if he's considering leaving as much as he's
I don't
leaning
mean that
toward
tongue
coming
in
back.
cheek. I don't mean that being a smart aleck. Yeah. But wow, he had a tough last two games. Go ahead now.
Andy, if there's a surprising decision so far, who would it be for you?
I think the one we talked about was Luke Wypler, declaring for the draft after starting 2 seasons at center. It's not so surprising because he is on draft boards. He's ranked pretty highly among centers, top 5 among the major analysts. So it makes sense why he is declaring, especially with so much turnover that's happening on the offensive line. Maybe it is a good time to declare for the draft. But I think, it wouldn't be a surprise either if he had come back for another year, just given the anchor that he is for that offensive line and given that he only had been there for 3 years. So I think that was one that I think raised some eyebrows a little bit, and certainly has Ohio State, needing to adjust a little bit down there at center. And that's something that we'll talk about with Matthew Jones, I'm sure, next, who could provide some versatility in shifting over to that spot.
Yeah, that's my guy, is Matthew Jones. It's not as much surprising as it is just big for this team to have Matthew Jones come back. Both Matthew Jones now and Donovan Jackson become the instant leaders of this offensive line. And that's not just because they have the experience. It's because Donovan Jackson, we saw in training camp, we saw him practicing second team left tackle. We saw him being at guard, and he can show positional versatility. Matthew Jones was rated as a center out of Erasmus Hall when he came out of high school. He was the #1 center in the country, almost a 5-star player, might have even been a 5-star player. But he was a center. So there's versatility there where if you have a guard that you're confident in and need a second guard, well, Donovan Jackson can play that guard, or Matthew Jones can play that guard. If you're not confident Jacob James or Toby Wilson or any of these guys could play center, okay, well, Matthew Jones can play center. Then you have 2 guard spots to fill. Then if you need one more tackle, you get one in the portal. You're not super confident in Josh Fryer, which I think they are. Donovan Jackson can play tackle. We know Ohio State wants a tackle out of the transfer portal. It's become very evident of that. But what I will say is Josh Fryer at the other tackle, presumably, considering what we've seen from him so far and the way he played in the absence of Dawand Jones for a game, if you get a tackle in the transfer portal that can play at a high level, and then you bring back potentially both of your guards or guard center combo, you're looking at a very good offensive line and one that you can build upon rather than being on shaky ground, losing 4 of your 5 and having a couple rough recruiting spots in 2019, 2020, 2021. So I think that Matthew Jones coming back, not only for himself to prove himself to the NFL, but for this entire roster, I think Matthew Jones coming back is huge for this team. And Ohio State can go ahead and thank the NCAA's COVID year for that, because he should be out of eligibility, but he gets that 1 year, Tim.
Yeah.
I think it's going to be huge for this line.
Yeah, Matthew Stetson Jones.
Yeah.
You know, yeah, of course it is. And just think of replacing four of the 5 starters would have been an unbelievable task when you kind of, it kind of makes you wonder what's really going on there, because but the bottom line is they can put a credible number 1 line together right now. Enoch Vimahi, I really like him. He came on, talked to him before the bowl game, obviously, been waiting for his shot. And I thought he played pretty well when he went in there for Matt Jones this year at times, but so did Josh Fryer. So they can come up with a credible offensive line. Like if they just need one guy to step up. And like you said, if you slide Donovan Jackson out to left tackle, you need one guy to step up in that guard position. They've got several candidates for that, as you just delineated, guys, because it's not so much you're pigeonholed, you're a guard, you're a tackle, you're a center when it comes to Ohio State football. So they can do that, but it obviously opens up these departures open up a major opportunity for Luke Montgomery, for example, right out of the gate. And I think that guy is what we think he can be. I could see them playing him early to bring him along, but it's, boy, leaning on a freshman on the offensive line is still difficult. There have been very few who've come along who I thought were up to that task, and not the least of whom was Orlando Pace. He was pretty good, but I haven't seen Orlando Pace walk through the door since then. But the bottom line is, that to me, when I look at the offense, I think they've got 2 quarterbacks that are very capable. Just who is going to be the guy? You got to believe, like we talked about in the previous podcast, Cal McCord's going to be the guy. He's going to get that first look. Right on down the line, they're loaded at wide receiver. They're loaded at running back. Cade Stover coming back, that's a big deal. He's a leader. He's also a hell of a blocker, but he's a leader on this team. Forget about just the offense on this team. But, man, the thing about it is I look at this offensive line, I can see them coming up with 5 starters, but now who are those next 3 or 4 guys? That's going to really be the question you want to see answered in the spring. And this other idea, because they missed out on several guys that they were looking at is in the transfer portal, obviously, because Oregon started waving its NILs around, et cetera. But the bottom line is I'm not sure if you're going to get that big-time quality dude in the spring after spring ball. You know what I mean? I'm not sure I want somebody else's cast off after spring, but that's just my way of – I'm talking about from the transfer portal.
Andy, I think that's the next step of this conversation is, they missed on Jeremiah Byers in the transfer portal, who they liked from UTEP. Johnny Cornelius from Rhode Island went to Oregon. Jarrett Kingston, who they hosted last week, Lettermen Row confirmed on a visit before he went out to USC and ultimately chose the Trojans. He's a California kid. Don't really blame him for that. But you've missed on 3 guys in the transfer portal now, Andy. It looks like the portal is kind of closed for business now. It closes, I believe, on Monday. And so if you're going to find a guy, it's going to be in this May period. Do you want to bring a guy in for training camp? I am of the opinion that you're going to have to, because I think there's Josh Fryer is a capable tackle, but Donovan Jackson can play tackle, but I think you'd rather find a guy in the portal. So with spring practice, do you think that there's some guys in this room that can kind of alleviate that concern and make it so you don't need a tackle in the portal? Or do you still think the Buckeyes will be shopping in the portal after spring practice for that tackle, Andy?
I think you have to. But the other thing that you mentioned is all those schools you listed, for those guys that they were targeting are all the big NIL schools. They're all the schools like Oregon, USC, Florida State's the one that got Jeremiah Byers. Like
Yeah.
those are all schools that have that money that pay up front with the collectives, whereas Ohio State takes a different approach. It's more of once you get here, you sign with a collective and then you prove your value and then you have endorsement deals and all that stuff. So it's just a little bit of different strategy. And I think you're seeing that at play. But there's not to say that guys will get to these schools and maybe it won't be what it was advertised to be. And they go through spring ball and they don't like it. And I think you'll see more and more often as we go on in the sport that guys will transfer just after a few months. Like sometimes it's all that's advertised recruiting world and you get there and it's just not what you thought it would be. And we're seeing guys flip and transfer quicker than ever. So I don't think it's out of the question that guys would leave. Now it comes down to, would you want guys that only stuck around for a few months at a school? Is that the kind of character you want or the kind of discipline that you want? I don't know. But I think that is at play. I don't think that next transfer window is out of the question. But certainly depth is so important because Tim mentioned all these guys coming back, skill positions, they're loaded. There's no question. But that doesn't matter if you can't block. And even if you got 5 serviceable guys or credible guys for a starting unit, there's going to be injuries. We saw it this year. And honestly, they got pretty lucky with injuries this year up front.
Yep.
I mean, it can be way, way worse. I mean, I just covered a team last year in Boston College that basically had an offensive line injury every single week. They were replacing 4 out of 5 starters from last year, and it was a complete mess. And it didn't matter that they had an NFL wide receiver who's top 5 on many draft boards at that position. It didn't matter that they had a good tight end transfer from Notre Dame or a quarterback coming back. None of that mattered because they couldn't protect and they couldn't run block. And I think it'll be much better for Ohio State considering the talent that they have. But if you don't have depth at the 6th, 7th, and 8th spots at the offensive line, I mean, guys like Jacob James, Zen Mikowski, like other guys that need to step up, it doesn't matter if you get someone in the portal or you don't. You need to have depth beneath that first unit.
Yeah, no, real quick. And I'm not knocking the guys that are on the roster. They've got to have some guys step up this spring. I mean, you know what I mean? I mean, now that the clouds have parted, there's a path to playing time, et cetera. And, they've had another year or they will have had another 3 months in the Mickey Marotti program, et cetera, I'm talking about from the end of the season and stuff. They've got candidates there, but they need for them to step up, and it's we're going to find out, how recruiting has gone in that offensive line. When it comes to the offensive line room, over the last couple of years, we're going to find out this spring, man. This is a real interesting barometer time. I think you agree, don't you?
Tim, I think you're exactly right, because I think, some of these guys that are younger guys, I'm looking at Ben Chrisman from that 2021 recruiting class that Justin Fry didn't recruit, but he inherited, and now he can show the developmental path. I'm looking at Tegra Shabola, as a guy who is 310 pounds, 6'6". Could he make that Dawand Jones-like rise? Remember, 2 years ago, we weren't even talking about Dawand Jones as a potential starter. And in training camp, Greg Studrawa said he's so good that we had to move Thayer Munford inside to make room for Dawand as a starter because he's so good. Guys can make those jumps, George Fitzpatrick, maybe even, some of those guys that have been in the back of the depth chart for so long. Can Trey LaRue finally step up? Can Grant Toutant finally show an ability to block? We haven't seen it from him yet in 3.5 years, but there's not to say that he can't, make a jump. Can Jacob James become that center that people want him to be? So there's some guys that can do it. It's just a matter of doing it. And so this spring is going to be huge for all those guys. And I'm especially got my eye on Tegra, who is a bigger guy, a lot of expectations from various outlets coming out of high school, a guy who can move his feet pretty well. If he makes that jump, then you don't have to go to the portal. Then you got Josh Fryer and Tegra, and then you can keep Donovan Jackson inside. You keep Matthew Jones at guard, and Jacob James plays center. You look at a really good offensive line there. Maybe Enoch Vamahi steps up and pushes somebody. So they have options. It's just the idea of if somebody doesn't step up and play at a national championship level, because this offensive line was a national championship offensive line, it blocked Jalen Carter. It blocked those guys against Georgia really well. But you cannot just have a Big Ten level offensive line at Ohio State. You have to have an offensive line that can win you a national championship. And if you don't have that on April 16th after the spring game, you have to go look in May, whoever enters the portal after spring practice, and say, can that guy block at a national championship level? If the answer is yes, I think you've got to take a swing at him. And so That's the offensive line talk. I'd like to probably talk a little more about the other guys who have made those decisions as far as leaving, going. We still waiting on Tommy Eichenberg. I think that's the biggest decision of the entire offseason for Ohio State. He's a guy you can build a defense around. He's not just any linebacker. He's an All-American candidate. He'll be a preseason All-American if he comes back. If he decides to return to school, Andy, I'll start with you. If he decides to return to school, I think that is absolutely massive for Ohio State. When you already talk about Steel Chambers, saying that he's coming back for another year. Their other roommate, Cade Stover, is coming back for another year. You've got CJ Hicks in the mix. You're talking about a really deep and talented linebacker room if Tommy Eichenberg decides that Ohio State is his next move.
And some continuity for a defense that has been changing and changing over the last few years, and having Jim Knowles there for the second year in that 4-2-5 system, having the same two linebackers starting there would be really key for this team in trying to have some consistency and continuity and that side of the ball. And I think Tommy Eichenberg is more than just a linebacker. He provides a good pass rush. He was third on the team in pressures generated this year. He got home for 2.5 sacks, had 12 TFLs. This is a guy that can kind of do it all. We know that he doesn't say a lot, but he certainly says more when he's within his context of the team. He's a leader. His guys go to bat for him. And, you mentioned his roommates both coming back, Cade Stover and Steel Chambers. You have to think that he's at least thinking about one more year with the Buckeyes, given the way things ended and his close friends returning for another year. So I think that's certainly a decision that we need to watch and see what happens, because you mentioned there's so much depth there, but to have two guys coming back that were successful this year, I mean, Tommy could have very well been a Buckeyes Award finalist this year, was snubbed from that list. And, I wouldn't be surprised if he was up there again next year.
Yeah. He may have already announced he's coming back. We just didn't hear him. I mean, what an enigma he is in some respects. But, you ought to hear him at the Euchre tournament in the house. That's what Steel Chambers and Cade Stover will tell you. But, yeah. But the bottom line is, wow. I mean, you could put on a highlight video of why he wouldn't come back too. I mean, the way he was triggering this year and getting after people, even in that college football playoff semifinal. I mean, his acceleration to the ball was ridiculous this year, as opposed to a guy that you could tell was thinking a lot the year before and was banged up a little bit. But with CJ Hicks and some of these other guys champing at the bit, and with only two linebackers playing most of the time, I'm just interested in what that will do to the dynamic in that room if Tommy Eichenberg, does in fact return. I know the coaches will worry about that next year, so to speak, but it'll be an interesting room to watch from a name standpoint of maybe who sticks around after spring if in fact Tommy Eichenberg is back. I don't know if y'all agree or not, but you have to keep your eye on those kind of things too. But I would clearly trade having Tommy Eichenberg back for one more year, playing at the level he was playing at this year, and maybe taking it up another notch, as opposed to what might happen 2 years from now, if you follow my drift. But that's a big decision. And of course, as we record this, I don't think CJ Stroud's even announced what he's doing yet, right? But we all expect him to leave. Why wouldn't you? But until they say they're gone, they're still here, right?
No. CJ Stroud's going to the NFL. I think that's pretty safe to say. Same could be said about Paris Johnson and really Dawand Jones. I think those guys earned the right for us to expect them to leave. Paris Johnson gave up, I think, 2 sacks on the year. One against Michigan, one against Georgia, where he was caught a little flat-footed, and it was really rare to see. CJ Stroud played his tail off all season for the last 2 years, really. A 2-time Heisman Trophy finalist, actually starting to, in some people's eyes, push Bryce Young as the number 1 quarterback in the draft. In my eyes, Tim, those guys, don't necessarily have to announce that they're leaving. Like I said, I think they've earned the right to be, hey, that guy's gone. They have played well enough where, they're leaving. And some other guys, like Tanner McAllister, had an up and down year. I thought it was important for him to come out and say, I'm going to go to the NFL draft, because he did have another year of eligibility. Ronnie Hickman said, hey, I'm leaving, but he did it during the Michigan week, which I'm not sure why during the Michigan week that was necessary, but
because he got it, hey, I'll give it up to him on this. He got asked that question and he answered it truthfully. You know what I mean? Yeah. I mean, just seems like there's a time for a question and a time not. But I'm not going to ever knock anybody for asking any question. But I thought about that too, like I'm looking at him and I'm just going, where's he going to settle in? When it comes to the draft, for example, there's a great example. And just like with Luke Wypler, I think the guy had a hell of a year, but where's he going to settle in when it comes to the draft? And maybe did he have the potential to make more on name, image, and likeness this coming year than, you know what I mean, than what he might see from the NFL draft? I guess we're going to find out, but yeah, like you said with CJ Stroud, some of these guys, it is like CJ Stroud is leaving for the NFL. The sun is hot. You know what I mean? They're both basically the same statement, you would think. But sometimes it's cloudy, like today.
There's a lot of guys who are going to be departing this team. Other guys include Javonte Jean-Baptiste, transfer portal, Zach Harrison going to the NFL, now popping up as one of the top 50 players in the entire draft, which is awesome to see for Zach. He worked really hard to get to where he was as a senior. Teron Vincent's going to the NFL. You've got other guys, throughout this roster, peppered through the defense. Really, the offense is bringing back nearly everything except for Dawand. For the 3 offensive linemen and CJ, everyone else is back. And so,
yeah, but that's a big man. Yeah.
Yeah. No, right. I'm not discounting how big it is, but just a lot of guys to replace Andy. And this is going to be a fun offseason to see how this depth chart shakes out. I'm going to have a depth chart projection, a way too early depth chart projection at lettermenrow.com here later on this week. That should be pretty fun to put together. But Andy, for now, it's going to be a lot of fun to track how this thing shakes out.
Yeah, it's going to be fun to see where these guys land in the draft that are declaring. I mean, the other guy we haven't talked about for a while, and for good reason, is Jackson Smith-Njigba, just because he hasn't really been as much of a part of this team given his injury and not being – he's like the number 1 wide receiver on a lot of boards right now. And that's another big thing for Brian Hartline and this group that just saw Chris Olave and Garrett Wilson go for 1,000 yards each. First duo from the same school to do that in their rookie season in the NFL. So, I mean, that's another guy just to watch for where he lands in the draft. But to go back to CJ Stroud, I think another thing too that happening in college, and maybe it's always been this way the last 10 years, is when you got guys that are extremely successful like CJ, where you're back-to-back Heisman Trophy finalists, they're also close in that quarterback room. And I think there's something to be said about wanting to give someone else a chance. I mean, we just saw Sam Hartman leave Wake Forest. He had another year. He could have stayed there. He's been extremely successful at Wake, but he wanted to give Mitch Griffiths or whoever was going to start at that position at Wake, a chance to shine. And he wanted to leave to Notre Dame, not only for himself, but also for the guys he was teammates with to have a chance to shine. And I think that could be a play too with CJ. Maybe part of him wants to return, to get one last shot at a national title, but he's also got the NFL money waiting for him. And I know he also cares about Kyle McCord and Devin Brown and all the guys in that room. And I think there's something to be said about, giving someone else a chance and letting someone else develop.
Yeah. As we get through this offseason, Tim, Andy.
If I'm a college head coach, though, I want Sam Hartman back. I want CJ Stroud back. I'll worry about next year. I mean, a guy like CJ Stroud, fellas, doesn't come along very often. And these, we'll see how these 2 guys who are going to be competing for the starting job in the spring end up going. But I mean, you go back and watch, like a while ago, you talked about the offensive line taking care of Jalen Carter and the Georgia defensive front. I'm telling you, there are a lot of plays they did not. And CJ Stroud made some things out of nothing. And that was one of the great games I have seen a quarterback play at Ohio State, right up there with Justin Fields against Clemson a couple of years ago. And it was crazy, some of the plays and the accuracy he showed, et cetera, and why he is special. I mean, I'm watching him pregame warmups, and I'm watching those 3 throw the ball, and the ball just comes out of CJ Stroud's hand a lot different than it did those other 2. And I hope people understand what they've seen at this quarterback position the last several years, especially since Ryan Day showed up. It has been special. And, Cal McCord and or Devin Brown might be the next guy to step up there. But, man, I'm saluting CJ Stroud. This guy is a special talent, and it's going to show up in the draft. And I know that was unsolicited, and I'm not promoting him in any form or fashion. But the idea that a guy a little bit shorter than him in Bryce Young, because he won the Heisman and played for Alabama, would be rated in some books ahead of him is just astounding to me. And we'll see how it really plays out in the draft. Because you know what? The draft is all about a team falling in love with you and drafting you. It's not necessarily about 1, 2, 3, 4 anyway.
We will get into a lot of NFL draft conversation.
I know.
As we likely.
But I just think CJ Stroud, man, I just think some people have really underappreciated him for whatever reason. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
We'll probably be heading to the NFL Combine, Lettermen Row, where we will talk to CJ Stroud about that. We'll probably talk to Bryce Young about that too. But in the meantime, we're going to break down all of the NFL draft decisions at LettermenRow.com, where we cover Ohio State all year round. Thank you for watching the latest offseason report presented by Byers Auto. That's the 40-year vet Tim May. That's Andy Backstrom. I am just Spencer Holbrook. Thanks, as always, for watching, listening, hanging out with us. Come check us out in the Lettermen Lounge message board. We will see you guys back for another offseason report presented by Byers Auto in very short order. But again, for Tim, for Andy, I'm Spencer. Thanks for watching. We'll see you guys next time.